there is not the happiness. The here and between here and there is the happiness. So don't be in a rush to get there. You know, I catch myself doing that. Like I meet people like you guys, like I serendipitously did at the coffee shop. Normally I would have been in a hurry to drink my coffee and go. And then all of a sudden you were really inviting and you pulled me in. We had a nice little chit chat. And in those moments, I remind myself, I have nowhere to be but right here. Even if I'm late for something, I have nowhere to be but right here. And we need to remind ourselves of that in everything that we do. And when we do, we're going to slow down and have a more enriched and fulfilling life with stuff that matters.
That was creative disruptor Michael Marckx, and this is the Yogi Triathlete Podcast, episode 58 of the YTP. Welcome back to the place where every week we connect you with people who are looking, finding, and living their purpose. People like last week's guest, Kathleen Kastner, who, after several Hail Mary passes in life, has found her tree and is sharing her greatness with the world. If you didn't check out that show, definitely get it in the queue for a listen this week. Thank you for your support of the show. We are on a mission to create a better world. And although this could sound like a lofty goal to some people, for us, for you guys, for this community, it's simply the only answer to a world that is crying out for change. At Yogi Triathlete, BJ and I are driving our passion of high vibe living into the world by assisting our athletes to be their very best selves. By teaching mindfulness every chance we get, by promoting a healthy lifestyle through plant-based nutrition, and by sharing stories through this podcast. You are all a part of this mission. And from what we are seeing and hearing, you guys are getting in the gap and living more consciously. Enough at being asleep at the wheel. This life is too precious for autopilot. Awake and ready is the name of the game, and that's exactly what you need to be in order to create your best athletic performances, relationships, and your best self in this life. But this does not come without betting big, taking risks, and facing fear. Heck, no, it doesn't. Believe me, I know. But if you're into that kind of thing, then you are going to love today's episode. Michael Marckx is the Chief Disruption Officer at Creative Disruption, a virtual agency steeped in the art of progress, colored by variation. Hired by brands and institutions who are in need of a shakeup, Michael is well known as the guy to get the job done. From producing movies to controversial billboards to hiring picketers and complainers, Michael is not afraid to leave a mark that is to the benefit of his clients. A Southern California native, Michael grew up in an environment where curiosity was encouraged, interests were to be nurtured, and epic athletic pursuits were as common as family dinners. Inspired by his uncle Steve, as in Prefontaine, Michael ran his first marathon at the age of 12 in boxer shorts and a pair of Nike sneakers, of course. Michael went on to become a professional triathlete, racing against the likes of Mark Allen, Scott Tinley, and Kenny Souza. Living the life of multisport with heavy doses of competition and crazy fun loaded on top, Michael dishes on the insane training sessions of this time and also some pretty interesting experiences that he conducted after a serendipitous encounter with Timothy Leary, the Harvard professor known for his exploration of the therapeutic applications of psychedelic drugs. Michael has led an enriching life, to say the least, one that now allows him to guide others to success, whether that be his students at Cal State, where he is an executive in residence, one of the many companies that seek him out to turn their bottom lines around, or one of the 1,200 athletes that clip in every May to ride the epically challenging Belgian Waffle Ride. Touted as the most unique cycling event in the country, this year's BWR consisted of, are you ready for this? 140 miles, 13 categorized climbs, 13,000 feet of climbing, 40 miles of dirt riding, and 14 water crossings. Not your typical cycling event, but what I love so much about it is that Michael makes each and every one of his competitors think hard about their race day recipe. Every piece of equipment that will be needed for their success must be carefully chosen. With a 40% attrition rate, this race will bring every single competitor to a point of transcendence or complete annihilation. This conversation with Michael covers his beautiful life, which is truly a work of art, colored by variation. So sit back, pop the buds in, turn up the volume, because you are not going to want to miss a word of the wisdom spoken here by the original creative disruptor, Michael Marckx. All right, so we're just coming off the Belgian, well, I'm not coming off the Belgian Waffle Ride, but there's a bunch of people that are. And that happened
It was May 21.
May 21 this year, and
Sunday.
It was the 7th year?
6th
year,
Yeah.
and there's going to be a 7th.
Yeah, we're actually doing one in November in Arizona. So
Oh, really? Nice.
that will be the inaugural event in Arizona. That's November 5th.
And where's that?
It's in Mesa. So it's near Phoenix and Tempe. But
Nice.
It's in Mesa.
All right, well, we know some,
We're gonna be down
we know
there.
some crazy athletes
Yeah.
around that
it's
area.
Near where the triathlon happens.
Yeah, we just had a friend of ours. She was a podcast guest. She just finished Ultraman Australia. Not only did she finish it, she broke course records. She came in second overall. She's crazy.
Nice.
She's amazing. I think because now that she's got her Kona's done, her Ultraman's done.
It's time for something new.
Yeah, and that's what she wants. She wants to get into ultras. She wants to get into different stuff.
Yeah.
But she's really, really focused girl. Obviously, she can get that stuff done. Her name's Mary Knott. So yeah, now it's time for her to play. I think, anyway, I know she listens to this podcast, so I guess we're calling you out right now, Mary.
Get on that.
Belgian
Come
Waffle
on
Ride.
down.
Let's just dive into it. Let's talk
Okay.
about it. When did it begin? It was your idea, and tell us the seeds.
Oh, well, we have
seed.
to go way back, but
Yeah,
Go
let's
way
go
back,
Go
yeah.
way back. This is just a conversation. We'll see where it goes.
all right. My family's Belgian, so I kind of grew up with this cycling thing, even though we were runners to begin with. So I'm the oldest of 4 kids. My relatives were Belgian bakers. My dad was the oldest of 7 kids born to my grandparents, and he worked in the bakery as well, and as did every one of his siblings. I grew up with my parents being cyclists and runners, and so I ran my first marathon when I was 12, which really isn't saying much because my brother did it when he was 8. I have twin brothers. They did it when they were 8 and 9 and 10, and
So in your family, it's not saying much,
not
but
saying much at all.
for the rest
Yeah.
of the world, running a marathon at 12 is insane.
I know. I look at my kids now, who are 15 and 13, and I just laugh at the idea of my son running a marathon.
Do they have any interest at all?
No.
Do you remember that marathon?
Oh yeah, I remember it. I've run 45, and I think I remember all of them pretty well.
How did that first one go? Did you enjoy it?
You know, I trained for a month. I wore boxer shorts that hung down below my canvas soccer shorts.
Of course.
I had spent $28 on a pair of Nike waffle trainers, even though my aunt was the first, essentially, marketing director at Nike.
Oh, wow.
So later I used to get free shoes from her all the time. Excuse me. She used to date Steve Prefontaine. So Pre used to come down and spend time with our family when he would come to race, say the Times indoor or Sunkist indoor track meets, or even outdoor meets. He'd stay with us. So my first memory of the track that I ran on in high school was being there with my dad timing Steve Prefontaine on that dirt track with the stopwatch while I ran around in circles on the inside.
And he was just a family friend.
He was just, he was like Uncle Steve. So he inspired all of us to become runners. So it was sort of a natural thing. My dad was a marathoner. My mom was a marathoner. I'm the oldest of 4. We're all going to do that, right? So all 6 of us ran marathons. And so I had this, endurance thing going on from a young age. I also did my first bike race when I was 12. And so I've always sort of carried this love of endurance stuff, and eventually became a triathlete because I swam too when I was younger.
So it's just a natural transcription.
Yeah, like in college I played soccer and I ran and I swam, and then my senior year is like somebody's like, well, why aren't you a triathlete? And I was like, oh yeah, good idea.
And what timing was it? What's the years around?
86 was my first triathlon.
Okay, so really the sport was new. Like it was
Pretty
79,
new. But,
right?
like 86, I did Santa Barbara triathlon. It was a half Ironman. There were hundreds and hundreds of people that competed in that event. Open ocean swim, it was a 1.5 mile swim as opposed to 1.2. 56-mile ride, really hilly, and then a fairly hilly half marathon. My bike fell apart, and I remember being on the side of the road by Lake Casitas, like just trying to get the chain back on, and like, this is a nightmare. Getting it back on, finishing way behind what I wanted to on the ride, and then proceeded to try and run as many people down as I could. The next year, I think it was the next year or the year after, I did it, and I ran like a 1:13 half, which was at the time, I think maybe still is the record for the half. I didn't win though because I had flatted on the bike. So I was leading on the bike, I flatted. Maybe this is year 3.
Okay.
Flatted, fixed it, was a tubular, finished, and then almost ran down the winner.
I love it. So you had some bike karma early. So
I
the
got that
Belgian
stuff
Waffle
out of the
Ride's
way.
making a lot more.
Got it all worked out.
Yeah, we all have bad luck with that stuff, right? We all have our stories of.
Oh, we all
"Oh
have
my
our
God,
stories.
You wouldn't believe what happened to me.
Totally.
I was gonna win too.
You know, it just depends on how long we're going to like carry those stories around with us and let them, define who we are.
Well, when you look back on them and you laugh, like I went to San Jose to do. Back then, we had the United States Triathlon Series. That was what you did, and it was city after city after city, and you travel to compete. So there was San Jose, there was Dana Point down here, there was a whole host of events. And I remember going all the way to San Jose, came out of the water in second, chased down the guy that was leading. Just as I caught him, my back tire goes, psst,
oh my God.
And I had no spare, and that was the end of my race, right? So you eventually get your way, but you get driven back to the finish. You wait for people to come in.
And you have so much more in the tank.
And then you drive back home, which, like 10-hour drive back home.
So did you grow up in Southern California?
Yeah, we grew up in Palos Verdes, which is, LA area. And the PV Marathon, the Palos Verdes Marathon, was the one that I ran in 77 when I was 12. And then I did it 31 years in a row. So some years I would not train at all, not even a step between them, but I'd go, I got to keep my streak. So I'd go back to my parents' house. I'd spend the night. I'd eat a pasta dinner with my parents, show up, do the race, keep the streak alive. And then sometimes I'd be somewhat fit. So I'd try and win. And I remember one time leading to about the 22-mile mark, but the wheels started coming off the bus more like around 16 or 17 or 18. I remember I'm running and I'm fairly, 5:30s or something, a pretty good pace. And my brother, who was a collegiate runner at the time, came to meet me. And he met me at the 10-mile mark, I think. And I proceeded to run him off my butt. He was like, dude, you're going too fast. You're going too fast. I'm like, ah! And dropped him, and then eventually dropped myself. And then one by one, 4 guys caught me. So one after the next, and I'm doing that thing where you're looking back,
running for your life.
Though, if my grandma had come by and said, come on, Sonny, and slapped me on the butt and said, let's go get him, I would have said, go on ahead, Grandma. I'm good. And then I struggled in and finished 5th. But yeah, at 31 years in a row doing that silly
thing. So 31
thing.
of the 45 marathons you've run was this one.
And then there's Boston and LA a couple times, and Long Beach and Catalina.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about that.
Isn't that a trail? That's a trail one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I was just about to run my first ultra, or I just had run it when we met that day. Yeah.
You had just finished the one
in Mendocino,
up north. Yeah.
Yeah. The only one I've done.
Okay, there you go.
So far.
Yeah, so far. I'm signed up for Lake Hodges.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
So a local
nearby.
one here. Yeah, nearby.
That's
local.
BWR goes on those same trails, but we just do it on our bikes.
Yeah.
When people look at the trail and go,
on your road
wait,
bikes.
those are rocks. You can't ride your bike through there. And there's a creek. How do you get through the water? You ride through it.
So where does cycling come in to your, how does that disrupt your marathon running?
When I was a triathlete, I would ride 100 miles and then come off the bike and do my brick. And we used to, I'm not really answering your question, but we would have these funny workouts back in the day where we'd ride 100, 112, to sort of mimic the experience. And then we'd come back and do 20 miles. So we might be 6 or 8 guys and we'd hammer each other. And then you'd come off the bike and literally, there's no like messing around. Like literally it's like transition.
Yeah.
Throw the bike, put your running shoes on, and then go. And we had this 20-mile course we used to do, and we just used to see who could hang on the longest. And that would be complete overtraining, but we would do that. And then we would come back, and each of us would get a case of beer, and then see who could actually finish the case of beer the rest of the day.
Oh, my God.
Because you could do those things when you're in your 20s.
Yeah, you could. Were you a professional triathlete?
I was.
At that time?
Yeah, at the time, yeah. I mean, I was an amateur for a short period of time and then was on the U.S. national team and then became a professional triathlete.
So you must have been training with some names that people would know.
Well, being old, but
our craft.
I got to.
You're not that much older than us.
Yeah.
Good. So you'll know Mark Allen and Scott Tinley
and
Mike Pigg and Kenny Souza. These were
of course
contemporaries.
So were those some of the guys that you would do these crazy bricks with?
That was the Orange County guys, which had like its own little fraternity up there. And then there was the San Diego guys. Eventually I left the Orange County guys to be with the San Diego guys and moved down here to be closer so I could do the Wednesday ride and the Tuesday run and swim down here with them.
I just learned about the route that like the triathletes would, the Palomar Loop, the Henshaw Lake, like
Kenny loved that.
It was like a solid like triathlon group ride.
Yeah, and you'd hammer the climb, and you'd time yourself.
Yeah,
everyone had their time going up, and man, I think those times would still stand up today.
You do,
compared to say what Horner and Phil have more recently done on Strava. Some of those times were incredible, like what Kenny Souza would do back then and a lot of the other guys. But Kenny was the fastest of our era in terms of riding the Palomar.
That's so cool. Yeah, I just experienced that for the first time last week. I haven't gone up Palomar. I'm going to do that tomorrow. But I did get out to the Henshaw Lake Loop, and there's a lot of climbing from here. It's like
just
5,000 feet.
BWR went out really close to Lake Henshaw at Mesa Grande.
Okay.
That was the furthest east we went. But you're still at like 3,200 feet at that point. And you basically started at sea level.
Yeah.
So your first 62 miles, you're just climbing out. And then eventually you come back and go down for a long time into a headwind. And then eventually you end up at Double Peak where many people walk their bike up there.
Yeah. Well, I want to break down the course.
Yeah, so I'm going
to go back to the question about how long were you in triathlon?
86, then 87. I went to the World Championships in France. In 88, I won the World Amateur Duathlon Championships. Won a few races. Turned pro, won a couple more. Got hit by a car. That ruined my triathlon career. Had a year of rehab. And then surfed and played music for the next 14 years and didn't race or do anything. I think I ran the marathon those years, but never trained. And then I got back into running because it's an awesome, easy thing to do, and was having some fun as a master's runner, and then tore my meniscus. And what you do then is they put you on a bike, and thus the bike thing kicked back in.
Yeah.
Much to the chagrin of my wife, who used to complain, like, Sundays we do a 20-mile loop, and so I'd be gone for 2 hours and 10 minutes or something, and she'd be like, "You're gone it's too long." And I said to her one time, I was like, "You better hope that I don't get back into cycling." And sure enough, like within a month, tore the meniscus, got back into bike racing, and
now you're gone
it takes
for
a lot more time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like sometimes we were talking about this earlier, but if the kids have, let's say, a 10 a.m. soccer game, I would get up at 3, like other crazy people do.
Right.
Or no crazy people do.
Some people, crazy people.
Ride. Like I remember last year, I got up at 3, put the lights on, left the house before 4 or at around 4 in the morning, went to Huntington Beach and back, flat, it's only got rollers, and was back before the 10 a.m. soccer game. And then like I'm at the soccer game and some dude, one of the dads is really hungover and he's like looking at me like, I barely got here. I was like, oh, really? I was like, I already rode 125 miles today. I'm feeling pretty good.
Poor guy.
Dude went over and I think he threw up after he did that. He was having a shocker. Yeah.
He's like, hair of the dog. Yeah. That's what I need. Oh my God.
So sometimes those are the things you have to do to fit it all in, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, getting up at 3:45 has been a very common thing in our life. I mean, making coffee at 3 in the morning. And
yeah, I got up at 3 this morning.
Yeah, there's something really fun about it.
I like it. I was writing stuff for the magazine and working on work stuff that I knew I wasn't going to get done today. So I was like, well, if I get up early, I can get a lot of stuff done and then not feel bad at the end of the day when my wife wants to just chill with the kids.
And you're not thinking about how you have to write for the magazine.
Yeah.
What do you think about that early time in the morning for being creative?
It's the best for me. All the stuff that I write or create usually happens in those wee hours. The later in the day, the more distracted or tired you get, or your psychic energy ends up going other places. So those early morning hours for me are most productive.
Do you have like a typical morning routine that you like to do?
I don't have an alarm, but I get up around 5. I work a bit, then I ride, come back and take the kids to school, or don't take the kids to school and then work some more, then go to one of the various offices that I end up going to. On Tuesdays, I teach at Cal State University San Marcos, so I know what that day's like. Then the other days are all random. They're all meetings, and because I work with 8 or 10 brands, depending on the day, every day is different and interesting.
Yeah.
And fun.
What are you teaching at the college? Just as an offshoot.
Branding and marketing is what I lecture on at all the grad schools here in San Diego, and then sometimes SC and FITM. And at Cal State University San Marcos, I am a executive in residence, so I help get students ready to graduate and enter the real world. I help them figure out what it is that they want to do, and then help draw them a roadmap for getting there, as well as I do large session lectures as well as small group lectures there. So I do quite a few things there, and it's fun. Like when you even just get one student out of 30 in a specific class that responds and comes to your office hours and wants to talk for 90 minutes, it's like it feels good because you know that they're inspired.
Right. Yeah. And that might be what that whole lecture was for, was just that one person.
Exactly. And I'm totally good with that.
We're totally good with that too. Yeah. Like we'll have one person reach out to us and just people share like these amazing experiences that they're having from, these interviews or something that we said on one of the podcasts that we do or something that we've written. And it's like, whoa. Mm-hmm. And it's just sharing our life experience and what we've learned. And similar, to what you're doing, a lecturer, like based on all the years, you've had a lot of years of experience working with some big brands and just sharing your experience. Yeah. And like it will land, like if it lands with that one person, it's like, well, that's what it was all for.
Yeah, you just touch that person, but then they end up taking that energy and spreading it out.
Ripple effect. Mm-hmm.
The ripple effect is so powerful. And what I love most, I think, about the ripple effect is that we'll never know how far it goes or how impactful it is. And so the only thing that we can do, I believe, as leaders, I consider myself to be have leader qualities, is to just continue to do what feels right, and be present and speak authentically from experience, that there's no right or wrong. It's just, this is my perspective based on the life that I've lived, and similar energies are going to connect with that because that was always the plan.
Yeah,
right? Like we never know what that plan is.
No, and isn't it fun when the one person that did hear, out of all the people that heard what you shared, you don't know. It's untold as to what impact you had on their life. Just as a priest giving a sermon, you don't know what, when people are leaving the congregation, what they go out and do in the world. But there's probably a good chance that they've got some bearing on life as a result of what they learned. But isn't it neat when someone circles back with you and says, I just got to tell you. And then they go on to say, that one thing that you did inspired me so much, and here's what I did with it. Because I get that through the BWR now, is I get messages from people I don't even know. Whereas originally the first race, I invited 136 people. So I knew them all. And so, their experience was my experience and we could share that. But now there's people that are coming from all over the world. I didn't even get to meet at the event because there's, nearly 1,200 people racing. But they email me back and say, I just want you to know you changed my life, which basically means the event and their choice to commit to that, to get out of their comfort zone, to do something that other people told them they couldn't do, and then they do it. It's the commitment, and then it's the journey from that moment of commitment to the event that is this road of happiness. And then they do it, and it forever transforms their perception of themselves and the world that they live in. And for sure, that person has other people around them that they've had an impact on. And so that ripple effect, that reverberation is happening. But it's a delight when I hear back from them and they tell me that this silly little thing that I created selfishly and have nurtured along somewhat selfishly has enabled people to change their lives for the better. That's the coolest part of it all.
You provided them, you could walk them through it and speak to them and tell them, like, this is how you can train and get along, but you've provided them this space for them to work things out on their own.
Yeah.
So basically they're discovering on that day who they really are. They've done the training.
Yeah.
But you've provided that environment. Now they're out there on their own for, I don't know how long it takes to do this.
10 hours, 16 hours, depending on the
quite a lot of space, a lot of time with yourself and your thoughts. And
it's just such an honor to be the steward of something like that. And that's how I see us as from Yogi Triathletes. We're just the stewards of this amazing brand that is about helping to create a better world through the people that are doing the work themselves, creating a better world within their community, that ripple effect, and just having that higher vibration, that higher energy, that, oh my gosh, look at what I can do. That's what creates the better world.
Yeah. The simple act of committing to something and then following through on that is what enables us to live fulfilled lives.
Yep.
Or it's certainly a component of a fulfilled life.
Yeah. So, all right, I still have in the back of my mind getting back to the cycling shift.
Yeah.
But now that we're on this, the question that comes up is, one of the things I believe that really halts people in this ability to live a fulfilled life, which is our right as being humans, that we have this right to live this fulfilled life.
And we have a choice.
Yes, we have a choice.
Yeah.
But fear will get in the way. So how do people get on that other side? I mean, you're human. You had to have experienced some kind of doubts or fears along your very successful path. How do people get on the other side of it?
It's never easy, but I know that from my experience and from watching students or watching other athletes, watching people I love, it has to do with that commitment. So we're afraid to make commitments, so we don't, right? We get caught up in this groove, if you will, of I have my job, I go there, and it's 9 to 5 or 6 or whatever, and weeks and months go by without even being anything other than asleep at the wheel. And life gets in the way of being fulfilled and doing things that are important to us because, we're making money and we're too tired and we're deaf to what our higher self is telling us to do. So the way you do it is you have to stop and maybe even meditate on something. And meditation can be looking at the line on the bottom of the pool. It can be sitting on the trainer when you're just below LT and you're just kind of trying to find some escape. It can be literally being present and sitting there thinking and not thinking. But ultimately, there has to be the contemplation of what can I do to be living a more fulfilled life that's in tune with my higher self. So a lot of times we have to figure out what it is that we want to do that makes us feel most alive. And then the thing that helps you overcome the fear is you make the commitment, and the commitment is difficult because you might fail. And we have this fear of failure. People are going to laugh at us. I might not do it, whatever the non-motivations are. But once you're able to commit to something and live up to that commitment to yourself, and you transcend that barricade of fear, you realize that that's all BS. That those constructs that you've created, or that those around you that have created, whether it's our parents inadvertently or our teachers or mean school kids, you couldn't run the marathon, there's no way. Oh, I'm going to run it this weekend. I'm just harking back to my 7th grade experience. Once you overcome that, the first time it makes it much easier to look at those similar fears and go, yeah, that's not me. That's not going to affect me. And it can be something as simple as a young person being interested in another person, being too chicken to ask them to go hang out. And who knows? What's the worst? The person going to say no? And then what?
Right. It's the same essence of energy. It's just it just can be more intense. But I mean, to somebody like a kid saying, "Hey, do you want to come over and hang out?" That could be as big of a fear and level of intensity as someone saying, "I'm going to quit my job and start this
and move across country."
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Who would do that? Yeah, like I'm gonna get rid of my dream house and everything I ever thought I wanted, and I'm gonna move across the country, and I don't know where I'm gonna live.
Yeah.
It's the same essence of fear, and I love how you described it. But I think the more and more we get to the other side of it, we know deep inside, like, wait, I've already gotten to the other side of fear before. I can do it again. And so I think that's the beauty of the mind, that we can remember that we have overcome the adversity of ourselves to move forward. So if we did it once, we can do it forever.
Yeah. And keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, and remind others to do the same. When I was a kid, I met Timothy Leary at a book signing in Del Mar. And he was left, like the thing ended and then his ride didn't come and get him. So he's left there alone with me. And this was right around 90 when I was working on the Ironman triathlon. And so I just sat there and just rapped with the guy. I was intrigued by everything he had to say and his book, which I had read. And had this wonderful experience, and he inspired me to do a number of things that I won't talk about here, but I've actually given a lecture on these things. But one of the profound things that he shared with me is we have the spectrum of experience in life, and a lot of us only experience this tight little spectrum that doesn't reach too far out because we're afraid, or there's the comfort zone is right here. It's not way out. And for those of you at home, my hands are moving way outside because Timothy Leary used the hands and he pushed them out. And he said, there's two things in life. There's that which brings you joy, which is love, and that which brings you fear on the other side of the spectrum, which gets in the way of you being able to experience more joy. So he said, what you need to do is push in to the fear. You need to push into it, but like hug it and move it, and hug it and move it, and move it out so that your spectrum, your breadth of experience is getting wider and wider. And the same thing with what you love, what brings you joy, is get into that even more, to hug that joy even more and bring it out further so that you're broadening your life experience. And he sort of left it left me with that. But he inspired me to do a number of experiments that I did over time. And then I ran into him again as he was dying of cancer. He refused to go the normal treatment route. He had prostate cancer, and he just sort of embraced his death and did so valiantly and interestingly.
Like a master.
And wrote a book about it. But my band was playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go on the fabulous Sunset Strip, and his son was a friend of liked the band, so his dad was there. And I was like, Timothy, do you remember meeting me in Del Mar? And then he was like, oh, yeah. And he like totally remembered it because it's probably 5 years, 6 years had gone by. And he reminded me at that time what we had talked about. And he said, do you remember what I said about joy and fear? And I was like, yes. And in fact, this is what I've done since. And we had this glorious conversation. And then, he ended up moving on the next year.
And that's no different than your student coming to you or your athlete from BWR and saying, this is what I did with what you gave me. And so for people who don't know who Timothy Leary is.
So Timothy Leary was a Harvard professor who was the progenitor of LSD usage. And so at the time in the 60s, LSD was legal. And
he was all hooked up with like the Ram Dass crew, right?
Yeah, that came as a byproduct of his life experience.
Yeah.
So he went from being this revered professor to being, a pariah. He was dismissed from his role there and became a criminal on the lam for, predictable stuff. But then became, the let's just call him the progenitor of the counterculture movement. And, drugs and lots of other things, but he was always more, he wanted to be responsible with it, but, in his exuberance, he was irresponsible with it, right? But a genius and a great teacher and a great point of view, but, his legacy was so much tarnished by the aftermath of him leaving Harvard and all that, but a fantastic philosopher.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like an intellect who was very much in touch with his higher mind.
He was, and some would argue that, he did that artificially. And I would say, well, does it matter? He got there,
Yeah.
We can all get there. We can choose different means, but we can all get there. And that was what was important to him, is not necessarily this tab or this drug, but that you realize you have a higher self that you can get in touch with. And why not do that? Why not? Just like, why not live like Christ, right? Whether you believe that Christ died for our sins, the way he lived his life is the way we should live our lives. And there's other people we can point to throughout history that you could say that's how you could live your life. Christ just happens to be an easy example of why not just live that way. But I was just really lucky to meet him, and he was really intrigued with my experiments that I did that he had inspired, because he never knew in the span of his existence of what he taught people and what he inspired in people, no one had ever done what I had done based on his nudging. And just so it's not such a, why doesn't he tell us what he did? There was a whole host of experiments that I did, but one of them was I had a comeback from my triathlon experience, like I think it was 88 when I got hit by the car and had to stop, but then I made a comeback after working on the Ironman. Basically, the folks at Gatorade that were the title sponsor, they had a bet that I couldn't be the first athlete to break 9 hours for their first Ironman. So I was like, oh, I'll take that bet, no problem. And so there was this $1,000 bet that was placed at that table. So I became motivated. And so I won the Ironman qualifier, but I did it under the influence of LSD, which, some people are like, what?
That's...
Wow.
I love that experience.
It was incredible.
What course was it?
It's the Ventura, it's called Mike and Rob's Most Excellent Triathlon. Anyway, I won that
Sounds
race.
like the most excellent one to do on LSD.
Well, there might have been a few, but that one was a fun one. And then the 100th running of the Boston Marathon. It's a similar experience.
Interesting. There's a story that I love, Timothy Leary may even have been there, but it's a story when Ram Dass goes to India and he's with the Maharaji, and the Maharaji says, well, let me take some of that. And he's talking about the LSD, and he's, well, only take a little bit, and I'm paraphrasing this, only take a little bit because it's really powerful. And the Maharaji, give it to me. So he takes like a whole bunch of LSD. Oh, no. And it has zero effect on him.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it has no effect on him whatsoever. And essentially that's the moment when Ram Dass realized, like, wait a minute, there's another way that I can get to the place that I want to stay at.
This is a shortcut.
This is the shortcut. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's definitely mind expanding.
Yeah, so that I was lucky enough to have those just incredible encounters with him, those years, with the years in between, where I actually acted on the things that he had told me in the first instance and then was able to share them with him later. It was just one of those.
And then he left the world.
And then he did.
That's really cool bookends. Mm-hmm. All right, so now that we're talking about triathlon again, so your wife's like 2-hour run, too long.
Yeah.
And now you're like, guess what? I'm getting back into cycling, honey.
And that just takes more time. And
so is this when the BWR started to?
No, but we're getting to the genesis of it. So I started racing pretty quickly and was really into it. And a friend of mine does this thing called the French Toast Ride, which is 118 miles in Ventura, coincidentally, and around that area.
Such a cool area. I love that.
It's awesome.
Love it
riding.
Up there.
And it's invite only. So 30 people. And they go out and we hammer each other, and it was a lot of fun. And Dave's family would make French toast. We'd eat that. We'd do the ride. We'd come back, eat more food, and then go. And so, a couple years into that, I had taken a job to turn around Spy Optic. So it was a publicly traded eyewear company down here. So when I moved down here, I asked him for permission. I said, look, I want to do something called the Belgian Waffle Ride because I'm Belgian. I want to make it more like a one-day spring classic, like a proper road race that's really long, that's punctuated by, cobblestone sectors, but we don't have cobblestones here, so I had to introduce dirt and create this race that was more in line with the type of racing that I personally am good at. Longer stuff, not really long climbing, but punchy climbs. I love that stuff. And dirt, because I'm a cyclocross racer. So he said, sure, you can do that, no problem. And then that was the first year. Of course, he was invited. And it
was
as I mentioned,
invite only.
136 people, I think, invited. And then the only caveat was you need to tell everyone if you had a great time at this event, you need to tell them. So the next year, we introduced the event to everyone that wanted to pay to do it. And we had 300 and some odd people pay money. And then the next year, 600 and some odd people, and then so on and so forth. So it's had this nice growth trajectory. But the whole idea was to create something that didn't exist, that sort of filled a hole that existed in the United States cycling world, which, the one-day classics didn't exist. No one was doing these. They call them gravel grinders now. I don't think of our event as a gravel grinder. It's a road race that's got these punctuating sectors. And it's the kind of event where, what bike am I going to ride? Like, you don't know what weapon you're going to bring to the battle. And that's part of the allure of it is, okay, it's really long, it's hard, it's in dirt, and I don't know which vehicle I'm going to ride. So there's all these considerations. What tire width? What do I do about comfort? What do I do about clearance? What do I do about mud? And all these factors that, sort of inform your bike decision, your training. And it forces you to orient yourself towards that moment on the calendar that you've committed to, because you have to train to get through it. You have to know your equipment. You have to be comfortable in the dirt. You have to know all the various things that you're going to encounter because otherwise one surprise just might blow you away and say, okay, I'm done, which might even just be the headwind that you encounter on the way back. And it's blossomed in people's minds as this alternative to anything else they could do on the bike. And thus it has this allure that people have come from all over the world to do now.
So the total distance is 100 and...
It's been 6 different courses in 6 years. Next year will be the 7th. Last year was 146 miles. This year was 132 miles. But most everyone that finished this year said this year was harder than last year. So I don't know. Every year is different.
Why do you change the course every year?
Well, part of it is the desire to give a new experience and to create an even better masterpiece. And the other part of it is the county forces us to change all the time. So we've never been able to agree with them on a great course. Last year's was awesome, but they said, oh, you got to change it now. So we're sort of at the whim of the county. And they're talking to USA Cycling. They said San Diego County is the most difficult county in the entire United States to get a bike race permitted. And I believe them because it's crazy. It's like the county does not want anyone to ride a bike or to do these events. So they make it increasingly more difficult to put on. And as soon as you get the first checklist done, they say, oh, well, we've got more checklists for you because, in fact, we're just going to keep adding checklists until you give up. And then when you don't give up, finally, the Friday night before the event, they give you a permit. So every one of the years, I've never gotten the permit before 5 p.m. on Friday, before the event, except this year I got it at 2:38 p.m. on Friday.
Well, we met you at Steady State Coffee, which
like
is
the week before.
We're right
I think
here.
it was the week before.
It was the week before, and you were on a ride, a Friday morning ride, and you came up and you had a coffee, and we were just chatting with you, and you were saying that you had submitted the course in like February or something like that. November, yeah.
And then they didn't even respond to me till March. And they said, we didn't even look at your course, but we just want to make sure that you're doing it for the CAF again this year, Challenged Athletes Foundation.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, we'll get back to you about the course. So it wasn't until April.
And you were like, I haven't gotten the permit.
Friday.
Probably won't have the permit for a while. And the race is like a couple weeks away.
Or less. So I think that Friday I submitted one of 16 courses. And by like Tuesday, I'd gotten sort of a verbal that, we think this one will work out. So Wednesday, because it was a new course, I got up early, drove to the Lost Abbey where the event starts and finishes, and rode the entire course myself, by myself, to just make sure that it was passable because they had made us change things. It's like, oh man, I got to go out and actually ride this thing. I can't just, send people. So I got to enjoy the course, as I mentioned. By myself.
By yourself.
That's a good word, enjoy. So what was it this year? So in the past, it's been about 40 miles of dirt.
Yeah, like 41 this year, I think.
And I mean, these guys are on, I love the recipe that needs to go into this race because they're on mountain bike single track.
Sometimes, yeah. Really like rocky stuff.
Rocky stuff, sandy
deep
stuff.
Sand.
It could be muddy.
That little bridge over the water.
There's water crossings.
There's a few of those. Yeah. Last year there was even more little bridges and water crossings
and then did you take them up Double Peak again this year?
Yeah, every year we've gone up Double Peak.
And that's towards the end of the.
It's like mile 1. Last year it was like mile 139.
Give us a rundown of what this year's course looked like.
So the beginning was completely altered by the county. We had this incredible beginning that we don't encounter really any lights except for one in Rancho Santa Fe at a T-bone intersection. So easy for the CHP to control. And then a network of dirt trails before we head out. This year they made us cut all of that out because they didn't want us riding through there 2 hours before the 9:30 church service that happened on that road, which is just completely asinine. So we ended up going north into Escondido and going up to what's called Deer Springs. And then on the other side of the freeway, Deer Springs does this. It goes straight up, and it's called Mountain Meadows. So that's at exactly mile 7. you turn right, and you climb up this wall. And I would warn everyone, like, it's just terrible climb.
How many miles up is that?
It's just like 1 mile, but it like...
What's the grade is pretty
steep.
It's
like I don't know, a steep... How steep is that?
He has his arm like almost vertical. Like straight up.
Yeah, 90-degree angle.
It's terrible. But, so Phil Guyman got the KOM on that, and then was, that was the first KOM. There's 3 KOMs that you race up to, get a collective time. But then it goes down a dirt section called Cougar Pass, which is awesome climbing up, but it's terrible going down. And people were taking it too fast and going off the side, or they were losing their water bottles because they didn't have the right kind of cages.
And this is all dirt here.
And this is like the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? This is mile 10.
Nice.
And you're going down dirt and you're losing your water bottles. And the first aid station was at like mile 25, which was sand, which was completely impassable. So here comes the leaders. You have to dismount, get off your bike, carry your bike across the river, which is now just filled with sand, to the other side, get back on your bike, and go. There was an aid station strategically located there. We didn't expect so many people to stop at the aid station. It was a hot day, and all those people had lost their water bottles. Oh, yeah. So we ran out of water for like 60 people there at the first aid station. But we were loaded heavy towards the back where we felt like, okay, people are going to really be stopping later on. This is mile 25. They still have 107 miles to go.
Yeah, like those guys, the guys that are going to come through first are going to be coming through fast. And yeah, they're not even going to want it. Oh, man.
So we ran out of water for like 60 people, which was a real bummer. And that kind of set off a cascade of stress of us having to get water, go out and buy more water and bring it to the other aid stations. And then one group of 30 people that were going to own the Ramona station just did not show up that morning. They no-showed. It was a bunch of fraternity dudes. So we had to scramble to get people to drive out to Ramona to man this aid station.
Good thing you weren't racing.
On the fly. I know. It's the first year I haven't raced, and if I hadn't have raced, I do not know how this stuff would have gotten sorted. So I didn't even plan on being out on the course that day at all. I thought I'd be back at Command Central talking on the phone, directing people. But I went out to the first aid station because I wanted to see people in the sand dismounting because I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. And it's not that far from the Lost Abbey, so I could skedaddle back. Once I was there, I worked the entire aid station doing directing of traffic, and then literally filling water bottles with the big jugs till the last person went. Cleaned up the entire thing so that it was cleaner than before we got there, and then went on and just followed the wafer course, which is a 68-mile course, all the way back. I went from one aid station to the next, to the next, to the next, getting water, getting provisions, filling it all up so that they were ready. I did not get back to the finish until just before the finisher of the waffle event came in. So I was out on course all day, like moving water jugs and moving tables and things. I was more sore this year than all the other years when I actually raced it.
Oh, of course. Because you don't train for lifting tables and pouring water jugs and all that. All right, so tell us about the rest of the course. So they come through this first aid station, which sounds like a disaster.
It was for 60 people, but there's 1,200 people doing it.
Oh, perfect.
I still feel bad for those folks. So you go through this dirt section, and then you climb up Bandy Canyon, and then you turn left on Highland Valley. And Highland Valley is this climb that has like 4 or 5 pitches to it, and it's 4 or 5 miles to the top. It's 5 miles from the bottom, but we turned left a mile up. So it's 4 miles to the top. That's KOM number 2. And then you're up in Ramona, so it's kind of flat for a while. You go through Ramona proper, and then you get to this road. It's called Black Canyon. And it just becomes dirt. But it's a county-maintained road, and it goes up to Mesa Grande, and up there's an Indian reservation. When I rode it on Wednesday, it's in 11 miles of dirt. I saw 1 motorcycle, 1 fox, and 2 cows on that particular rush hour traffic. So there's no one out there at all. And so it climbs up, then it goes down, and it's a really tricky, sandy descent, and then it climbs up for another 7 miles. You have this sustained climb for 7 miles. It's nuts. People always eat it on the downhill, and my friend Carl was leading the race, my teammate off the front. He's the multiple state and national time trial champion. He's a triathlete, Carl Bourdin. He ate it really hard and was unable to finish. So he was out, and a kid, Sam, had gone off the front and was chasing him. So Sam ended up spending 80 plus miles alone on the front of the race until Jesse Anthony, who ended up winning, who also is a triathlete, but he's a professional cyclist. He caught Sam, I think, around mile 110. And Sam had been chasing since mile 30. So he spent a lot of alone time. Talk about being in a meditative state. So that climb up Mesa Grande is incredibly beautiful. Dirt road through this canyon. There's like waterfalls on the side and little pools of water. And it's just pristine. And you're like, wait, we're like Ramona's right there. But then all of a sudden you're like in the wilderness. Climbs up to Mesa Grande, and then basically it starts heading over towards Lake Henshaw where you were, and then comes back around and starts heading west on Highway 78. We take a ride at Sutherland Dam, beautiful, another backdrop for the event, and that descends this dirt road where lots of people ate it because they didn't see the 20 signs that said slow the funk down. Slow down. And then you climb back up that dirt where Carl had crashed. Then you descend back down, and essentially you take the highway all the way back to Bandy Canyon where we left off earlier, and you get on this 3-mile sandy dirt, very tricky section that's just...
Can you ride it, or
you can totally ride the whole thing, but a lot of people eat it. They just don't quite manage it. But I was going to say, Andre, who is a Challenged Athlete Foundation athlete, who's done the event a number of times. He did the Wafer Ride on his TT bike, which is like nuts. You know, people are doing it on their mountain bikes and their cross bikes and altered road bikes, and he's doing it on his TT bike.
The skinny wheels. And,
totally, yeah. just like your Quintana Roo there. So then we climb back up Bandy Canyon, and then now you get to the tricky part. You've gone nearly 100 miles, and you get to what's called the Mule Trail. You guys you'll run this at some point. It's an awesome trail. It's kind of hard to ride on the bike, but you get on that and do the dirt section to mile 100 where there's another aid station. Lots of people there. The Swami cycling group were supporting that, and they had like 30 people there helping out. Then you get on the road for like 50 yards, and then you get back on another trail. And that's the really challenging Lake Hodges Trail that's a part of the event that you're going to do. And there's the water crossing, there's the rock garden. It's this just challenging thing that a lot of people flat on or crash or give up.
Oh my God, their bodies, I'm just thinking about like no shocks, like on their bikes. Their bodies must just be
changing terrain too.
Yeah, and you're using your parts of your body you don't normally do to stay upright and to navigate. And one year on that part, I was riding with my teammate, and we were in 4th and 5th place. It was like mile 100, and we're on that stretch, and we're chasing the guy in 3rd. And literally, I felt like a bomb had gone off, and my bike had exploded, but the back wheel had exploded, and my handlebar had cracked off. We pushed, and Ryan, he goes, "Take my bike," and then right he says bike. You hear this psst. And he got a flat. So we basically got our bikes the next mile where there was an aid station. I borrowed a back wheel and then did it with one handlebar the next 30 miles. With just
of course you did.
And Ryan got a wheel, and we were able to finish.
It's like the essence of this race.
Yeah, you have
that.
To figure out a way to finish. So this year we didn't go that way. We stayed on the trail by Lake Hodges and never actually got on Del Dios for a long time. So we stayed on this really tricky series of trails that like gets more and more difficult, and a lot of people that had never done the event really didn't like that section. They're like, you could take that out, and it would be fine. I was like, no, actually we have to leave that in. That's where it gets difficult. That's where you actually are challenged just to stay upright, and that's part of the dynamic of the event.
But then you're getting close to the finish, right? Like you're close to the finish, but you're so broken down, and it's really difficult, and like that's where it gets down to like
transcend, right?
That's it, man.
You're putting them in that space without them like truly knowing about it. You're just like dumping them in there. Like, what are you gonna do?
That's where the yoga mind comes in. You know, hopefully they've got it.
And a lot of don't. A lot of them.
A lot don't. I agree.
Make it. So you come out of that trail at like mile 110. You've got some road to contend with, and then you've got a series of 1 mile or 1 kilometer dirt sections, one after the next, where you're like, oh, not another one of these, because it forces you to go slow, to be attentive, to use gearing that you're not used to using, and then it basically does that all the way to Double Peak. You get to Double Peak, you make it the left, you start climbing up. It's a mile climb.
Yeah, and Double Peak, talk about the pitch of that. That's no joke.
It gets to 23% at one point.
23%.
Yeah.
So it's like,
so
if
for
you can
Boulder,
see my arm,
Colorado
it's basically
people,
vertical.
It's bigger than Old Stage.
Yeah, that makes Old Stage look like a joke. Yeah, I was doing some training up there for Mendocino, and yeah, I would see people, cyclists, just doing repeats up there. I called BJ. I was like, "You got to get your butt out here, and you need to start doing repeats up Double Peak."
I stumbled upon it one day. Yeah, I got up there.
What good is it to do repeats where you're only going 5 miles an hour?
And I've done it. Downhill.
But then you get to the top, and you realize that it's nothing but downhill from here. But you go downhill only for a little bit, and then you have to take a sharp right and get on the trail, which you've probably run. There's this zigzag trail that cuts on the north side all the way back over to Twin Oaks Valley, where you go down the hill. So you have to do that trail. A lot of people eat it on that trail. I'm almost there. And then they crash.
Because that's a fast section.
It can be,
yeah. I bet it is.
And then you get to the road and no more trails. You descend down, and within a few miles, you're back at the Lost Abbey and drinking Belgian ale.
Nice. And eating Belgian waffles.
Yep. Delicious.
Nice. So you had 1,200 people start. How many people did you have finish?
Oh, so there's the waffle, which is the big one that had like 700 and some odd people start. And I think 400 and some change finished.
A lot of attrition.
Lots, like 40%. And then the waffle, or the wafer, the shorter one, 68 miles, that had about 400 and some odd people, and 360, I think, finished. So pretty. Well, there was about 30% DNF on that one, too. So whatever that ends up being mathematically.
And I bet so many of those people will be back. We hope. Finish what they started.
Some of them will never come back, but then there's always new victims that come along that we can nurture through the process.
Yeah, I'm going to include a video. It was from the 2014 one, and just watching it, my eyes were all wide. I was like, "This looks awesome!" As I'm seeing just so much carnage and people being like, "Oh, it's like you feel like you're going to die, and then you feel elated, and then you." Like, but you got to get to the finish. And so I'm going to put that video in there.
I'll send you some links to the other ones, because there's some really fun ones. And then I'll send you the minute one that I hope to have finished today.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Because this will air in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. We have time.
Yeah. It will air probably in about 3 or 4 weeks, actually, because we've got a couple in the queue. But I know that our listeners they're going to be, I told you, they're going to be drooling.
Let's hope they're intrigued, right?
Yeah. Get them out here. We're sucking them into all these California races. I love it. So the Belgian Waffle Ride, 6 years, big success. And this started when you were working at SPY.
I was a CEO at SPY and was involved in this massive turnaround of this company that was ailing. And one of the things I always like to do at the companies that I go to turn around is turn the marketing into a profit center. So rather than just spending money, we didn't have money to spend because the 4 CEOs before me had spent it all. So we had to be creative with how we market. And I thought, well, one of the things I wanted to do was create this really enigmatic thing that fit the SPY brand, which is extremely difficult, but had this fun name called the Belgian Waffle Ride. So there's this dichotomy to it. It's really, really painful and difficult, but it had this name that belied its challenge. And then we made it really fun, and all the wonderful people at SPY gave their time and energy to make it this unique event. And we made money from it, and then we'd turn around and spend that on more marketing. And it's the way you should market. Like it was the single most covered event or thing that we did as a brand, was this one silly little event that started in our parking lot. And so it had tremendous rub off for the brand. It supported the brand ethos that I had created and the spirit and the vision of the brand. So it all worked synergistically. But when I left, I told them, hey, look, you guys don't care about cycling anymore. I'm going to take the BWR with me, and I'm going to nurture this thing and make it what I had intended for it to always be. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of years now, on my own without SPY being involved.
And you're doing that under your brand, Creative Disruption?
So that's a company called Monuments of Cycling, because we have other events planned. Mm-hmm. And then Creative Disruption is my agency. So I work with lots of other brands doing marketing and branding. And then, as I mentioned, there's the university. And then I'm also a part owner of Monster Media Racing, which is a team that's in 18 chapters in the U.S. We're the strongest Southern California cycling team. But we have all these other chapters that we basically help people become really great racers. So we take them from being recreational cyclists to good cyclists to being, pros. The idea is to have them matriculate through and, be serious cyclists. So that's Monster Media.
Quite busy, it seems.
A little bit too much.
And so looking at your creative disruption, so it seems like, especially with SPY, you worked with what you had and you had to sort of interject a different way of thinking, because I think the normal routine in marketing is to, you need to spend advertising, you need to figure out, do surveys, find your market, spend money, attract more people. When you don't have that resource, you need to be creative. Mm-hmm. So do you feel your path in life has always been that way, to think the alternative, to be disruptive? And if so, where do you think that comes from? Where is that drive from? Is it from running a marathon at 12 years old, which isn't what normal kids do at 12 years old? But thinking back, like where is that drive to just be a little bit against the grain a little bit, if that makes sense?
No, it does. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a time with parents that were really supportive and nice and athletic, where I swam and I ran and I surfed and I played soccer and I played baseball and I played basketball. And my parents let us do all that. I traveled as a skateboarder as a kid and did exhibitions and competed. And I was just given the opportunity to do all these things. And in that sort of fertile ground of, yeah, sure, do whatever you want to do. I would be a bit inventive by creating events from a young age. And even my parents, they hosted a running event that had I think 8 different stops where you'd drink. So it's literally you'd run a mile and then drink, and which led into my interest in doing the beer mile.
I was going to ask you.
So as a, I don't know what 40, almost 50-year-old man, I ran a 5:26 beer mile, which is still the super masters world record. But that's because my parents taught me how to drink and run. I hadn't even run in a year when I did that, but I was really good at drinking still. So
what a gift.
Just the drinking is awesome. So to answer your question, in college, when I was president of my fraternity, and before that I was the treasurer, and I was like, we got to make money. So I created an event that was precursor to Lollapalooza at our school, but off campus, this massive event. And I got Coors to fund it, and they gave us 50 kegs and $2,000, and then we charged people to get in. So we had thousands of people there, and just incredible. And I was like, this is fun. How can I create other things that capture people's imagination and parlay that into positivity wherever I'm at? So it seemed like every place that I went, there was always the challenge of, hey, dude, we don't have that much money, but we really got to, the board of directors are really looking for some growth this year. What can we do? And I would inevitably come up with campaigns or product campaigns that would move the needle and that were at times Machiavellian. Like one time I was at Globe, which is a publicly traded company out of Australia. It's the largest manufacturer of skateboards on the planet. They have 12 different brands plus the Globe brand. And we were making the surf film that we had made for years. We'd been making for years, and it was going to be like our huge thing. And we were known for making great films. It was going to be our marketing initiative for that year. So I had one of the foremost surf film photographers who was involved in it. And I said to him, hey, look, we're going to call this movie Secret Machine. And you're going to publicly quit. You're going to send out a press release to the world saying, you don't agree with what we're doing. What we're doing is dishonest. We're using machines to do things, and you can no longer be affiliated. And so I wrote the press release for him. I created an email specific to him that came to me, and we pulled one over on the surf industry. The most amazing thing was people bought it. And I was getting emails from other very famous filmmakers saying, I always hated those guys, and those guys, and just like email after email. And then when it came time to the U.S. Open, we did the film premiere. We had people picketing the film, like the machine is evil, and it was amazing. We paid them to do that picketing. And then we had the premiere, and we had people out front picketing the premiere, and it was like the biggest to do ever. And it went on to be like of this century, so since 2000, like the surf film that sold more copies than any other surf film. Oh, yeah. So just stuff like that.
That's just like true. That's just true, like grassroots marketing. That's just like getting like.
Yeah, because it doesn't cost you that much.
You're getting down and dirty and planing it out, and like
everyone talked about it. Mm-hmm. And then the trade publication after wrote an entire story about how we pulled one over on the worldwide surf industry. And then when I was at SPY, again, we didn't have money, but we created the Happy Lens, which literally was the greatest lens technology to have been created in 50 or 60 years. But we didn't have the money like Oakley would to promote this incredible technology. So I got a billboard that cost $3,300 at Encinitas and Moonlight Beach.
Oh, yeah. The billboard's still there, isn't it?
I don't think SPY does it anymore. But
yeah, but there's a billboard over there.
There is a billboard. It's above Ride.
Yeah.
So we did, we did a billboard that said simply, happy to sit on your face, and the SPY logo. And of course, there was this uproar about it, which I intended. The Clear Channel that owns the billboard said, if anyone complains, we have to take the billboard down. I was like, yes, you do. So as soon as it went up, we contacted the local Patch. So Patch.com ran a poll, clever or crass, and the picture of the billboard. And then it's been the single most engaged poll they've ever done, where hundreds and hundreds of people are chiming in. And I'm having people in our team chime in against it and for it, and keep fueling the fire of this discourse over this billboard. And then I had someone call to complain to take it down. And then they called me and said, oh, we have to take it down. Someone complained. I was like, oh, yes, you do. So I had 60 picketers there to protest the billboard being taken down. So then we had the news agencies, the helicopters, everyone. It's 6 a.m, and they're taking down this billboard. And, the signs are saying, what's wrong with Happy? And Happy does sit on your face, because sunglasses do sit on your face, right? And this was in August and September. It was the beginning of September now. The Happy Lens wasn't even going to deliver until February. But we created this PR firestorm, if you will. So the next couple of weeks I spent on the morning talk shows talking about the billboard, but more importantly, talking about the Happy Lens and the science behind it and what it meant. And then we just, every month we'd put a new billboard up that would get people laughing some of them complaining. It was always like one notch below offensive, but maybe offensive for some. And then I'd back it off a little bit and do something a bit more benign, and then come back a month later and hit people with, what? So this whole series, years worth of billboard images. But by the time, and by the way, Adweek did 2 articles on it, CNN, Huffington Post, Daily UK, every major news outlet had done a story on this billboard and the Happy Lens. So by the time the Happy Lens delivered in February, it sold out immediately, and it had an incredible bearing on the company's turnaround story. So basically, the quarter before that, or maybe 2 quarters before that, we started on this really great run. We had 14 quarters in a row of year-over-year growth, just based on the invention of the Happy Lens, leveraging a $3,300 a month billboard, and being clever with how we told that story, so that it wasn't just a billboard that 11,000 people saw every day. It was a billboard that millions and millions and millions of people saw because it was promoted by these media outlets. And that was, a significant part of the turnaround story at SPY. And those are just things you have to do and have to create. So these are case studies that I use when I lecture at the different colleges. Like, you think you don't know what to do, but if you think about it long enough, some solution will avail itself to you, and you have to go with that, even if people are saying no, it's too scary, or they're trying to tell you all the things that could go wrong. You have to do it.
Yeah, you're not fitting that box of marketing 101. It's like the safe route of like, do this, this, and this. What you did was you built anticipation every month. What's going to be up there? Oh, there's nothing this month, but they're still talking about it.
Every
did you
month
see what they did last month?
Yeah.
And then you would hit them again with the next one. So you're keeping your audience so tapped into that spot. And I'm assuming you're using the same spot every time.
And then we would take those billboards and turn them into print ads or digital ads. My kids were going to school right near where the billboard was. So some of the parents didn't like me very much, but I always talked to my kids about it. But one of them was John Florence, is the best surfer on the planet, was one of our athletes. And we had a picture of him kind of chilling on the sofa like this, kind of smiling with his eyes kind of half closed. So all of these billboards were word driven, right? They're copy driven with an image. So the copy on this one, really big copy, was sofa, king, happy.
Right.
So for a few weeks, those that knew would go, oh, so fucking happy. That's cool. But my daughter, who at the time was like 9, she was like, Daddy, what does it mean? What does it mean? And I was like, Romy, say it fast 3 times. And then she, in her little 9-year-old way, she did. And she goes, puts her hand over her mouth and goes, oh my God, oh my God. And the next day she went and told all the kids at school.
Oh boy.
And then I got the call.
Every parent now is like,
oh great, now I got to explain this to my kids. So that the byproduct of that, when you're pushing the envelope, is you have to be comfortable with what might come on the other side. So I always made clear with my kids what was going on, so there was never any need for dishonesty. Like, this is marketing. Some people aren't going to like this. This is what this means. And it's okay. It's not okay for you to use these words. You don't hear your mom and dad use them, but sofa king is not using that word, but it's getting people to take it there. And that's kind of funny. So anyway, that was just one, but there was so many other ones. Like in Encinitas, it's like this granola, wheatgrass, everyone's doing yoga. It's, we're free and open and happy. But the one caption was, when wheatgrass and yoga aren't enough. And then the Happy Lens, right? Like every time we did something, there was like something that was just like made you smile and go, oh, I get it.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, there's the community's so open, but then they're
not.
Right. Well, it was funny. I actually was doing some research not too long ago about teaching yoga at some of the schools and just seeing if they had a program in Carlsbad. There was a massive uproar in Encinitas about yoga.
It was incredible.
Unbelievable because of the religious overtones and demanding the superintendent be fired or resign.
It was a massive...
This is where Paramahansa Yogananda set up the Self-Realization Fellowship. This is like the yoga. If there's a yoga capital, this is definitely one of them.
It seems like, Encinitas is definitely that.
That was so. Well, I mean, and you have to have. There's always a balance, right? So there are those people that are probably totally fine with it, thought it was great, and it's just words or words. Yeah, but then you have to have that balance. So those other folks that are rising up against yoga in the schools, which blows me away. If you look at the actual like definition of yoga, it's a science. It's a science. It's the science of the mind. But everybody takes their own spin on it. They take it very personally, and that's what was happening with those billboards. But you're creating conversation.
Yep.
And I think that's another place where fear comes in, where people like start to write something and they say, "Oh, I can't because people aren't going to like it," or
people aren't going to like me.
BJ and I were just talking about this the other night, and ruffling feathers. And how do you sit with that? How does that not affect you? Or is that just built into you? You're a disruptor. It's so clear.
It stems back to like the earlier question about the upbringing. My parents availed, we went to church every weekend. We lived this very normal life, but we were able to do whatever we wanted, and we were encouraged. I was a drummer and an artist, and same with my brothers. And we were taught that it doesn't matter what other people think of you, as long as you're doing what feels right to you. And that sort of repeated itself through life. And then the other thing is, as you mature and matriculate through your career, inevitably you get more and more responsibility. And my dad always taught me this. I used to hear him talking to my sister, who was very popular and a really wonderful person. He would say, "Susan, people are going to be mean to you, and the nicer you are, the prettier you are, the more successful you are, the more they're going to come after you. And you have to just be ready for that. And you have to learn to love them even more and not respond with anything other than more love." And as I matriculated through my career, you become more and more, you're managing larger groups of people. And you're trying, and most of the time I was engaged to disrupt. Like, hey, our company is failing and we need to change it. So what that means typically is you end up having to get rid of a lot of people who inevitably hate you because you come in and fire them. And so if you've done that enough, it's been decades of doing that, where you come in, you evaluate a situation, you realize that there are people on the team that shouldn't be there. You have to be the bad guy that gets rid of them. And then you build a new team for success. Everyone's aligned spiritually, and wonderful things manifest from that. But it's in the process of doing those things for work, and they're uncomfortable things. You have to grow calluses to what other people are going to think of you. And you have to get to the point where you don't care. As long as your mission is one that's altruistic or to benefit the greater good, and not one that's maligned in any way. But you're hired to turn around something. If you take the job because you believe in the task at hand, and then you do it, but it's uncomfortable to deal with that. And so anytime you're in that position, like my dad told my sister, people are going to come after you. And it's even like that, say on Strava, like people want to take your KOMs for whatever reason.
Yes.
And they will like get groups of people or pay other people to do them. Or a guy will have his wife drive in front of him to beat your KOM.
I was with somebody.
On and on and
totally
on.
with Lorenzo back east. Like,
it's
and
nuts.
then you peel off, and then he gets that last second to get.
There it's you.
Yeah.
And around here, there's culture. A lot of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of solid rocking cyclists around here, and athletes.
I don't mind them. The ones that take it legitimately.
Yeah. But I think you touched upon something that's so important, is that when what you're doing is in line with your purpose, and you are so clearly living in your purpose, when you're doing something that's aligned with your purpose, that fills you up, that you're being driven from your heart, and when you're driven from your heart, it is for the greater good. It is for the good of all. That you can disrupt in that way, and that passion for your purpose is so strong that the rest is eventually going to fall away, even if it is still loud and coming at you. It can fall away in your focused vision to keep moving forward. And somebody said to me once, don't worry about what other people think of you. It is none of your business.
Yeah, that's a good one. I used to, I've played music my whole life, and I've been a drummer and played in all these really cool bands. And for much of the immature part of my music career, I was always playing live, and I would always try and embellish or do a little bit more or add in something or be clever. Just as maybe we do with when we write something, right? Oh, well, I'll put this word in here. And that actually detracts from what it is that you're doing, which is this collective presentation of this idea. And it wasn't until much later in life that I realized that if I just played the least amount possible, that I was availing to the song its ultimate essence to be given to the crowd. So I was doing nothing but supporting and not distracting. And then at the end, that communal experience of being on stage with your brothers playing music, where there were no mistakes, and it was just this really wonderful presentation of that musical idea, it's so much better than being on the edge of making mistakes or making mistakes for your own egocentric point of view.
Yeah, just like trying to be good, trying to be clever. And there's, it's spiritual, I don't know if it's a law, but definitely a spiritual rule to live by, which is, minimal effort for maximum benefit.
Yeah. I read something about it this morning because I'm as I mentioned, I'm writing the magazine for the Belgian Waffle Ride. We do the recap magazine. And there's this dichotomy, but I was literally getting lost in the idea of a gunfighter. And a gunfighter, right, like has to very efficiently and quickly shoot their opponent. But it's only in the gunfighters that were the best were the ones that were the least distracted, that were the slowest to go about doing it because there was no wasted energy. It was the second nature of being able to take their opponent out, as opposed to this frenetic thinking about it, overthinking about it, and herky-jerky approach. It was the ones that were more methodical and slower. And I use that same thing, that same ideology with BWR when you're dealing with the dirt. It's go slow to go fast, which means this. You're in the haste of chasing down someone in dirt that you're not that comfortable with, but you're still riding with that haste. And in that haste makes the waste because you wipe out. Had you just gone a half a mile an hour slower or a mile an hour slower and negotiated that turn, you'd be further down the road. You'd be on your way to catching them. But no, you got caught up in your silliness and you didn't go slow to go fast. And that's, we can find lots of other applications of that in life, including our own happiness. Why rush there? Because there is not the happiness. The here and between here and there is the happiness. So don't be in a rush to get there. I catch myself doing that. Like I meet people like you guys, like I serendipitously did at the coffee shop. Normally I would have been in a hurry to drink my coffee and go. And then all of a sudden you were really inviting and you pulled me in and we had a nice little chit chat. And in those moments, I remind myself, I have nowhere to be but right here. Even if I'm late for something, I have nowhere to be but right here. And we need to remind ourselves of that in everything that we do. And when we do, we're going to slow down and have a more enriched and fulfilling life with stuff that matters, not rushing off to some arbitrary thing that we've made in our mind that we have to be there. And sure, maybe someone's waiting, but you can text them and say, hey, I met some really cool people. I'm going to be 15 minutes late.
I think that's all. I think that's perfect place to wrap it up.
All right, cool.
That was full circle. Michael, thank you so much for coming over to the studio.
I
the
love
recording
your studio. I feel quite at home. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, you guys, Michael Marckx, the YTP 58. What did you guys think of this show? I absolutely love this guy. I think he's amazing. So psyched to share him with the community. Let us know what you think about it in the blog post comments or on social media. We love hearing from you. And we do our very best to connect back with you guys, each and every one of you, as soon as we possibly can when you reach out. For those of you who want to know more about Michael, or you're just drooling over the epic BWR event, check out the show notes in the accompanying blog post on yogitriathlete.com. He's a pretty epic human, and I have to say that we are so blessed to have him in the YT community. Thank you all for tuning in to the show today and for supporting this show. You guys are an amazing tribe. And thank you for answering our asks with iTunes reviews, sharing the pod with your networks, and for those of you who have pledged on Patreon, we are floored by your generosity. Thank you. Please visit yogitriathlete.com and sign up for our email list. We send out a weekly email, nothing major, and we'll never spam you, but we just want to keep the tribe tight. We want to keep the lines of communication open, and what this will do is get you the insider info on our new cookbook. We're shooting for an August publish date through Amazon, and we want you guys to be the first to know. All right, so that's it for this week. BJ and I will be back next week with our monthly Ask the YT show. So if you have any questions, please send them in to be answered this month or next. Until then, you guys keep getting in the gap. Keep all channels open and remain awake and ready, because this world that we are living in right now is in desperate need of more consciousness, more love, and more risk takers who are willing to bet big on themselves to become more of themselves throughout this precious series of moments called life.